This podcast is all about getting divorced without losing your mind, where Corey Shapiro, a seasoned New York City divorce attorney, shares valuable insights from his book, Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind. He'll teach you how to be more creative and less reactive in your divorce. He also dives into discussions with experts and thought leaders on navigating divorce intelligently and calmly.
Welcome to the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. I am Corey Shapiro. And if you are joining our podcast for the first time, first of all, I'm sorry if you are going through a divorce. Never a pleasant situation. Even if you have a good divorce, it's a difficult process. But I really appreciate you joining us because this podcast is all about not losing your mind in your divorce. And if you're thinking that maybe you're going to do things that are not from the best side of you, because maybe you're just emotional, maybe you're not in the right space, maybe you've been so in pain for so long that it's really hard to think clearly. That's what this podcast is all about. And I am a divorce attorney strategist. I record this podcast in New York on Fridays, and I devote really the strategy from my book, which I have here, of course, Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind. It's also behind me. And I've done a podcast on it to just expand on these concepts. And I do it throughout the year. So if you are joining, we're doing the fourth video or the fourth episode on chapter 3, which is all about focusing on what you can control. And there's so much you can't control in a divorce. So let's focus on what we can control. But if you want to start from the beginning, you can just start from January. And we do have some bonus conversations from thought leaders, really good thought leaders about divorce. Or you can just stay with us right here and jump right in. So let's get going to talk about what we're talking about today. And this is one of my, I think, big shifts personally. You know, there's a reason why I became a divorce lawyer, is resolving not to escalate. We're not going to escalate conflict. That's really the whole point here. We're not going to escalate conflict. Yeah, that's what we're going to do. And how do we do that? Well, before we get into that, and we will get into it, and I'll give you some ideas. It's a very short piece in the book, but so important. I want to give you a quote from President Jimmy Carter. If you listened last week, I also did a president, so I guess I'm on this president kick. Maybe it's Memorial Day weekend. I don't know. I'm all about presidents now. But the quote is, "We fought fire with fire, never thinking that fire is better quenched with water." So let's use these smarter people than me and channel those people while we're doing this podcast. And just a quick aside, I didn't even know this. President Carter, still alive, and he's almost 100. Wow. So I hope he can make that, and I look forward to celebrating that major birthday for President Carter. Okay, the first thought I have here is just what President Carter said. You don't want to fight fire with fire, right? And the idea is you want to try to stay in that same sort of neutral position. As longtime listeners of this podcast know, I love tennis, and someone who really does this in a tough, competitive environment is Djokovic, where he has won so many more tiebreakers. And when he's in a tiebreaker, he goes into what's called lockdown mode, where he's just playing safe. He's playing, safe for him would be like the best I've ever played, but for him, it's safe. And he's just thinks he can stay consistent with you and make you make the error. And that's what you're doing here. So when someone's coming after you with fire in these texts and these emails, which are probably going to be exhibits in these difficult divorces, we don't respond right away. We're not fighting fire with fire. Remember, the battle is not between you two in that tough moment where you're focusing on your worst side of yourselves. The battle really is moving from that bad side of ourselves to the better side that can think longer term. So we got to think like water, like President Carter told us. The second idea I have here is be very careful with your words. When you're in a divorce, especially if you're in court, whatever you say can be taken out of context. Let me repeat that. Anything you say could be taken out of context and make you look bad. And you have to realize the judge is just a person. They just have their own biases. And when they think you might have said something which was a little aggressive, unnecessary, put you in a poor light, maybe they're not going to rule in your favor if it's close. I mean, if it's not close, obviously, but if it's close, and a lot of these cases are close, you don't want to give the judge anything to rule against you. So use your words wisely. Anytime you write something, think it's going to be an exhibit for court. So be careful. Okay, the last idea I have here, and maybe what my mom has been trying to tell me for years, is silence is golden. Silence is golden. A lot of times it's hard in that moment to be so restrained, to neutralize fire. So if you can't put water on something, and there's ways to do it, I think the easiest way to do it is just coming up with something that's repeatable, like a politician. And it takes time. It has to be in the context. But if you can think like a politician and always sort of try to neutralize, that's great. That'd be putting water on this situation. But if you can't do that, then in these terse exchanges, just be silent. And I would say you want to wait. You want to wait to respond when you're not triggered. And maybe there doesn't even need to be a response. Maybe it's not even that important. A lot of what happens in the divorces, unfortunately, is, I would say, noise. Something you don't really have to even focus on, but they make you focus on it. So let me try to just ground some of these principles home with a quick story. And, again, I became a divorce lawyer because, a part of me, I was thinking about actually divorce law and being a therapist. And I was like, which one should I go to? And in college, I loved both of my professors. I loved the psychology professor and I loved the government pre-law professor. And for some reason, maybe I loved him more. I went with government, right? So it's a competitive, and I learned a lot about what the Supreme Court does. And he said something really funny. He said, basically, these justices do what they want. They back into things. And so if you're an 800-pound gorilla, you're going to get your way. Right? You're going to get your way and you'll make up some argument to try to get your way. But then I realized if two spouses believe they're both 800-pound gorillas, then you're just going to lead to bloodshed, just beating each other up. And how is that productive? How is that productive for the children who are victims, innocent victims? So even if I can't beat up the other 800-pound gorilla, how is this helping the children? How is this helping me, especially longer term? When those emotions die down. When you're thinking in these custody situations, you have to think of graduation. If a kid's 4, I'm thinking what's happening in graduation? What happens in their wedding? It's not now. The time frame is very different. That's what I want you to be thinking of. So it's not just focusing on, this year, I'm thinking about Memorial Day weekend because it's just this year you have Memorial Day weekend, last year have Memorial Day weekend, and then you're going to make an application to the court. No. There's other ways to handle that could really help you out, to show maybe in this context that maybe they're gatekeeping, to really open up a can of worms. That's being smarter. So what I'm trying to get at is we're not fighting the 800-pound gorilla with our muscles. We're fighting them with our brain. And that's how humans dominated the world. We're not the strongest creature, but we're definitely the smartest creature, or at least we think we are. So that's my story. And if I have to leave you with one nugget of information, I'm going to leave you with the first step. And the first step, I think, is just don't exchange. Do nothing with these difficult texts or emails you're getting that just are setting you up. Do nothing. Talk to your attorney and create a creative, smart response. That's what I would say for your first step. All right. So thanks. Thank you for joining us on this podcast. Thanks for putting in the work. This is hard work. I'm shifting how you're thinking about doing things. It might be a little different than what your spouse is doing, what their attorney's doing, what you're seeing everything's being done, but we're rising above. We're looking at things above and we're thinking of strategy and what we want in our lives, in our divorce, with our children, how we're going to co-parent. We're thinking of all these things. And we do that by working not just in our divorce with our divorce attorney, but on our divorce. And it's hard to work on your divorce when they really just want you to work in it. So I really do appreciate you working on it. And remember, the more you can be creative and less reactive, you are increasing your chances to get divorced without losing your mind. Okay, next episode, we are going to do my favorite part of this chapter, especially when I was a teenager, is to do nothing. Do nothing. Take care.
Thank you for tuning in to the Getting Divorced Without Losing Your Mind podcast. We would love to hear your feedback. Send Corey an email to feedback@gettingdivorced.org. And if you've read his book, please consider leaving an Amazon review. This podcast offers general information only. It cannot replace legal advice. If you need tailored advice, contact an attorney licensed to practice in your area.